So good evening or good day. So we're going to be talking about the climate and also having to share a lot of misconceptions about gardening. So I'm going to share my screen and we get to begin this brief presentation about the climate and things that you should be taking into consideration when it comes to gardening. So the first thing that is going to be the climate. The climate that is defined by the United States Department of Agriculture as the hardiness zone. And when it's referring to the hardiness of a plant, it's referring to the amount of cold that it's able to tolerate. So in the Western United States, we know that temperature is very mild. And as you move to the east and to the north, then the temperature becomes a lot colder. And so the plants that we can grow here might have a much smaller window for people in the eastern United States to grow. So we have a very large window for plants to grow. So the hardiness is going to refer to the temperature, the lowest temperature that the plants can use. One of the biggest misconceptions that is out there is that Southern California and Long Beach is a desert, and that is in fact not true because they associate a desert with a lack of water. And in fact, we do not have a lot of water. We do have some rivers, we do have some streams, but we are not a desert. And we can use the plant to kind of help us along. So here on the screen, you have an image of a desert. We have some of the plants like creosote bush. We have some ocotillo and some of the cacti. That would be the indicators of a desert type environment. And here's another image. Once again, you have ocotillo and you have a few other plants. This is the desert that's about 2-3 hours from here. It's Anza Borrego in the San Diego County. What we have here in Southern California and in Long Beach, we have what is known as a Mediterranean-like climate. And that is because there are only five areas in the world that have exactly the same climate as California. One being the Mediterranean Basin, and that is where the name comes from. California, Southern California, Central Chile, Cape or the South Africa, and also Southwestern South Australia. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be very important here. First of all, I want you to look at the location in the world in the map. They are between the 30 degrees and the 45 degrees to the equator. So that the position in the world is very important. And they're also going to have the ocean towards the west. And the ocean is going to be the key. The ocean is going to keep us warm during the winter because the water is able to absorb the heat during the day and it's going to release it during the night. As well as during the summer when it's very hot, the ocean is going to keep the temperature a little bit lower. It's going to help us with that. So we have a very nice mild climate. Our average temperature here is going to be about 85 in the summer, and we rarely get any kind of real frost or freezing temperature, maybe once a night or one night out of the whole year, or maybe two. That's about it. The other thing that makes a Mediterranean climate very different than a desert is the fact that we have our rainy season in the winter and the early spring. Usually December, January, February would be our normal rainy season here. So we have a fall blooming or fall season, fall rain season, whereas the desert get what is known as a summer monsoons. We rarely get a summer rain, maybe a summer drizzle, but that's about it. Our rainy season is in the fall and into the spring. So those are very important differences that separates us from the true desert type habitat. And if we look at the plant themselves, they are not going to be desert-like. You have some trees that are going to be large. You have plants that are also going to have more leaves. So here is some of the what they refer to as the coastal sage scrub plant community, which would have been things that you would find around Long Beach or along the coast, made up of some of the buckwheats, made up of the white sage, and a few other plants. And so we can use what is referred to as the California Floristic province, which is going to be a very, very important hotspot for diversity. And that is going to be found in California from Oregon all the way into El Rosario, Baja California. And it is this portion that has a very, very diverse group of plants. So this would be what we can use as to determine some of the limits of this Mediterranean climate. And so if we are going to start to look at planting our gardens and planting our vegetables, we need to look at the Sunset Western Garden, which is the authority of plants, growing plants here in Southern California. And so they divide the Western United States into different zones. If we are to look at where we are right now, we are in Long Beach. And so Long Beach is going to be determined to be under zone 24, which is a subtropical climate. Yes, we have many plants that can grow out here outdoors without a problem. So, except for the extreme temperate plants such as cherries and almonds that require a lot of cold period that we do not provide or we cannot provide to them, and also extreme tropical plants such as coconut palms. Those do not grow here, it's too cold for them. But anything in between those, the extreme temperate and the extreme tropical, we are able to grow here in the subtropical climate, which is going to be in the zone 24. And then as you progress into other parts of California, then it changes to the desert and the mountains and a bunch of other areas. So that is why we are able to go around the city and find interesting tropical fruits like this water apple that is growing here in Long Beach that will bear fruit, or also a jackfruit. Jackfruit that will become a very large tree and will also bear fruit, and they will ripen them here in Southern California, as well as some of the papayas that you will find out there that is going to be more of a tropical herbaceous plant that will freeze if it gets very cold, but they do very well around here. And then other trees like the star fruit here, one of the largest specimens growing in Long Beach that is able to bear fruit and ripen it without any problem, or a nonset tree that is also growing here in Southern California in Long Beach and is able to bear fruit. So we are very lucky that we have a very large window of growing here in Long Beach. Does Long Beach have season? The answer is yes. And when we are going to be looking at growing vegetables, we can divide the seasons into two types: the cold or the winter season and the warm or the summer season. There are going to be different plants that will grow in each of these climates. So you need to be aware that not everything can grow, because at the end of the day, there is going to be some cold that some of these summer plants are not going to be too happy with. Our growing season is going to be 12 months out of the year. You can grow vegetables in Southern California 12 months out of the year, comparing to maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 in Eastern United States or somewhere else in the world. So be aware of that. And when we are going to be looking at growing vegetable, it is very important that we do what is known as a crop rotation. Keeping in mind that different vegetables will have different needs as far as vitamins and minerals, and also to prevent the escalation of a lot of pathogens. When you have several beds or a bed, it is important that one season you grow some kind of leafy crop, and then the following year grow some kind of member of the cabbage family, maybe during the winter, and then continue with the following season with some kind of root crop. and then maybe some kind of bulb or different type of plant. So changing the plants, rotating them, ensures that you are going to be sharing the vitamins and minerals because they'll have different needs. And also because the plants are so different, the diseases that may affect one plant is not going to affect the other. And so this is referred to as crop rotation, changing the crops where you grow them or the type of crops in the bed. When we look at some of the cities, here are now some of the gardens that are coming up. So these are in the realm of what we refer to now as an edible landscape. So the edible landscape component is becoming very, very important. So here are some of the beds and also some of the fruit trees. You need to look at your local municipality for some of the rules because that's going to change. But here in Long Beach, you can create your garden, or instead of having a ornamental garden, you can have some vegetables. Uh, the parkway, depending on the municipality, you may or you may not be allowed to put a fruit tree. Make sure that you check with them before you install one of them. And so here is some of the winter vegetables, some of the onions, some of the broccoli, some of the carrots, and a few other things that are being grown outdoors in Long Beach. And also in some of the Mediterranean style gardens, we have the incorporation of edibles. So there's no reason why some edibles cannot be also extremely ornamentals. We have, for example, our lemon, and or we have our artichoke, and then we're going to have some other form of either a herb or a medicinal plant that could also have some other benefits as far as culinary or medicinal value. So incorporating some edibles into the landscape is going to be something that you can do, and it's going to be something that's going to be well. It is very important that even though it is a edible landscape, that you continue on with the maintenance. There is no such thing as a maintenance-free landscape. So you harvest and you continue on planting so that the garden looks appealing, so that the garden looks pleasing. Otherwise, it may look like a weed patch, and then it's going to become more of an eyesore, and the neighbors might not be happy. So if you're going to grow vegetables, harvest the vegetables, plant some more, and continue on harvesting. And don't forget to follow up with routine maintenance to your garden. Here is another landscape. So we have some ornamentals that will serve as a buffer. So that's what the public want to see. And inside we have an assortment of different peppers and eggplant and or other edibles that can be grown. And also here is an entire landscape that got completely changed from an ornamental to an edible. So as we walk around the corner, there are going to be trellis or structures for climbing plants to grow. We're going to have, from the view of the street, you can see that it looks pleasing. We're going to have examples of bitter melons that are fruiting, as well as beans that are ready to be harvested. So a combination of both edible and ornamental with different types of structures for plants to grow on. When you are going to be planting the garden, the most important thing is going to be the light. We have already discussed that light is the most important component for plants to grow. So it is important for you to understand that the sun will come up or rise from the east and will set on the west side. And so what is referred to as the south area of the garden is going to be the area that will have the most amount of light. And so when you are going to be deciding on where to put my garden, it is very important that you find the location with the most amount of sunlight. So the most sunlight that you can give the plant, the better it is for them. And so when you are going to be installing your garden beds or the orientation of your garden beds should be oriented from east to west. That is so that you can maximize the exposure of the sun. And also, it is very important that you put the bigger plants towards the north side. Keeping in mind that the sun is going to come from the south, the smaller plants should be in front because they'll get the maximum amount of light. And then you can step up in height so that the tallest plant or things that will climb on a structure would be or need to be on the north side to keep them from shading the smaller plants that are going to be in front. So orient your beds from east to west and put your smallest plant towards the south side and the biggest plant towards the north side of your yard or the planter bed. That is very, very, very important. If you have the means, you should be growing plants in the ground. Plants in the ground will have a lot more resources. They'll have a much bigger area for them to extend their roots, and they're going to be much, much better. So we can look at some of the community gardens where people are doing just that, and they are growing a lot of crops with extreme success. So growing them in the ground is the best. And if we look at agriculture itself, for many, many, many thousands of years, the ground has been the best place for us to grow our crops, including some of the zucchinis and or some of the onions, and here are being harvested for the market, as well as the carrots, because California is an agriculture state and we are the biggest producers of carrots in the world. And so here they are growing in the ground. We do have some plants like potatoes that you can bury them in the ground and they will grow very well here, and you can harvest them whenever you need them. Or you can also use some of the ornamentals that will have other culinary values, such as the thyme that you see here being used as a ground cover, which could be part of a kitchen garden that you can just harvest your fresh herbs for cooking. If you are going to need a garden bed or a raised bed, you do not have access to the ground, then perhaps Urbanite, which is nothing more than recycled cement. Garden beds can be made out of many, many materials, or you can also grow them in container, grow the plants in container. So Urbanite was very popular a couple of years ago, where they were trying to avoid dumping a lot of the cement from buildings that were being brought down, and they would create a nice raised bed for the plants to grow. These ones were built at the Luther Burbank elementary school for their garden display and for the children to grow plants on. And so once again, maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. So here is a garden that has the urbanite, but it has been allowed to just kind of degrade and it's not going to be as attractive. Here is some of the retaining walls that you may find at Home Depot. Do you need to go out and buy some of this expensive material? The answer is no. Plants don't really care where they want to grow. Obviously, it is has a great aesthetic value, but it's not really necessary. But it's an example of a raised bed where they're growing some peas and some fruit trees, or maybe even some cinder blocks. Here's the extreme where they generated several raised beds by the using of plain simple cinder blocks. They're relatively inexpensive and they can last for a very long time. When we look around, we see different styles of bed. They could use a few more plants, but for now it works to delineate an area where the plants can grow. The raised bed can be made out of anything. So depending on what you might want, they could be made out of wood. You can go get some lumber from your local garden center, or they also have some prefabricated kits that you can just assemble them and you have your instant raised beds. And the raised beds are not necessary if you have the ground, but if you are a little bit older, or maybe over 20 years of age, and you might have difficulty in leaning or bending, then the raised bed may be a very good option for you. What is important with the raised beds is that you make sure that the wood is not treated. So there is a process where they would treat the wood to keep them from rotting. And unfortunately, those compounds have been found to leach into the soil, which are not too healthy. So make sure the wood is untreated. If you want a wood that would last a very long time, you can buy redwood. Redwood has natural compounds that are going to deter the growth of fungi, and the wood will last a lot longer. Or you can also opt for getting raised beds that are made out of recyclable plastic or recycled plastic. They're going to last a lifetime, and you don't need to change them ever again. But depending on what your preference is, there is going to be many choices for generating a raised bed if you need to. Here's just an example of some of the raised beds when they were built. So nothing more than just simple lumber made into a square. They do have a uh, connection to the ground below. And or here are some of the prefabricated form. This is a display when there was an Earth Day event here in Long Beach. And so this would be the bottom of the bed as it's been assembled. And then you have the sides. There is a shade cloth that allows water to go through, but it prevents the media or the soil from escaping. So that is going to save you some money and some time. So there's a liner at the bottom. Then you fill it up with your favorite soil, favorite media, and then you are able to plant your vegetables. You can make this higher or lower depending on what is your ability to either bend or kneel or squat. So here's some of a different view with some of the plants. So these are available from different garden centers. Or there's a couple of smaller one if that is what you choose. If you only have a small space and you want to grow a few things, then some of these small ones may be a better option. Here's just example of how people are growing their own vegetables. Very simplistic raised beds where they keep all of their gardening tools, supplies, and everything else. Or here's where they change an entire landscape into a form of a raised bed with a wooden border, and they are growing now some tomatoes and some artichokes and a bunch of other plants. Or here is the fabricated, the recyclable plastic. So these are kits, and notice how the bed is stepping up, and notice the bigger plants are going to be on the north side. So this will be the north of the bed. When we look at a different view, so here is the bed. So here will be the north, that will be the south, and that's where they're going to be getting sunlight. When we look from the outside, you cannot even tell that there is a vegetable garden behind. And so having some kind of walls, having some kind of flowers to just buffer the edibles from the view of the public, it's all that you really need, or a really nice fence. Some of the garden beds that have been built that have received no maintenance, not good. If you're going to have this area, why are you not planting it? Why is it not being harvested? Why is it not being used adequately? So keep planting more vegetables, keep planting more gardens. Here is a different example where you have different vegetables being grown, including some of the strawberries that have a net, because obviously birds and other insects may come in there and eat the strawberries, as well as artichokes. And or here we have a different garden bed with growing in the front. What is very important is that if you are going to decide to change your lawn into a garden bed, it is very important that you kill the grass, especially if you have what is referred to as devil's grass or Bermuda grass or Kikuya grass. Those are grasses that are going to have a rhizome or a stem underground. And if you do not kill the grass adequately, you're going to be dealing with a big problem. So it is not just, oh, here, I have a grass, I'm just going to put this bed and grow vegetables. No. Get rid of the grass, make sure you have a complete kill, and that is going to ensure that you're not going to be fighting with that grass for the rest of your life. Because here, that did not happen, and we can see where the grasses is already growing out of the bed from below, and now it's going to be a big problem. So you will have to remove it by hand, and you will never beat this grass. That is why it is called devil's grass. So make sure that if you are going to be replacing a lawn, especially a Bermuda devil's grass or Kikuya grass, that you get a complete kill of the grass before you start growing your vegetables. Here's a different example. We have an assortment of different ornamentals, buffering a several gardens bed behind. And in this case, they are growing a lot of onions that are going to even resemble some of the ornamentals. They have the same color, the same form, same shape. So here's the ornamentals, and here are the onions and the other winter type vegetables that are being grown. So here's a perfect mixture from a distance. It looks like a regular landscape, and you will never know that it's things that you can eat, and it still looks very, very nice. Here's a side of a house apartment complex. And if there's only a small place for them to have the beds, as long as it gets sufficient sunlight, you can still grow many, many, many things. Uh, Here's where they have changed their landscape and they have made a lot of raised beds. Potentially, this might be a person who might not be able to bend. And so we have different beds that are going to be planted throughout with different trellises. And here they are growing carrots as well as borage. And later on, there's going to be a bunch of other things, including some of the kale and broccoli, and I'm sure some beans and peas that will climb onto those structures. So many, many garden beds or raised beds here, much, much taller. And here's some onions and strawberries on those hanging baskets and a bunch of other things. And here's a different view of that garden. Or here's another garden where they have use some very tall beds disguised from the front with a nice fence. And behind the fence, you have some charts on a very high garden bed. So this one, you don't have to bend, you just have to lean over. And they're very sturdy, and you should be able to do all your gardening needs in here. So it's much, much taller than the others well built. And from a distance, it looks like a normal landscape. Containers, are you able to grow plants in container? The answer is yes. It is highly recommended that you get the biggest container that you can find. We have here just a few examples. We have the whiskey barrels that you can get at Home Depot. Those are going to be good for growing several of the big plants like tomatoes and broccoli and cabbage. You have some of the standard 5-gallon containers that you can grow some of the smaller stuff. And then we have some of those clay pots that are horrible for growing strawberries. So this is a stage photograph because they dry out very quickly. But they're good for succulents and a bunch of other things. So unless you really like succulents, you can use those strawberry pots, but do not use them for strawberries because they're hideous and horrible and not good for them. Just some examples of different types of containers planted very in with plants that are growing very well. So just big containers. We have a basket here, or we have the raised beds that are made out of aluminum. So these are going to be made for horses to drink water, but if you drill some holes underneath it for drainage, then you can use them as raised beds. And so we have some of the examples here. There's going to be different sizes. Here, there's the small one, and it has some beautiful tomatoes that are growing quite well. So this will last a very long time. It's aluminum, so it's not going to corrode as quickly as some of the other metals. And so it's going to be a kind of like a one-time investment, and then you can replant them year after year. Or there are some of the material that is going to be more of a fiber. And I like to refer to this as gardening in a bag, because you are growing them in a fibrous bag, and it has a small frame made out of metal, so that's just to keep it in shape. So we have different types, different sizes that are available. Some of them for small trees, some of them for those living walls. So if you have a vertical garden, or you want to put plants on a wall or against a wall, then you can use the bag like, so that they'll serve as a container. So here is a display at a area in San Diego. I think this is like the water department in San Diego. And so there's different fruit trees. So we have some peaches, we have some apples, and then we have different types of raised beds in some of those recyclable materials, or big bags if you want to refer to it. And so here are some of the living walls. They are very porous. They will dry very quickly. So it is very important that you water them adequately, or that you water them as often, because uh, all of the soil, if it dries out severely, it's going to be bad for the plant. So that's what was happening here. They were replacing a lot of the plants that unfortunately died because they were not adequately watered. So it makes important that if you're going to use this material, that you increase the amount of water that you use on the plant, or you water on a more regular consistent basis, so that it's not going to dry out and you're not going to lose your plants. So here's the side with the irrigation. And so here's some that are trellis. And then here's some of the container. This was uh, the garden that was located in front of Long Beach City Hall. They since have remodeled this area, so it's no longer there. But during the time, they had a display garden. Not the best, but okay, it'll do. It's just containers, so they can move around. They can move them left and right, put them in the right sun. Some of them had some kind of lighting apparatus, and they even had some kind of living walls with succulents. Okay, it's not the best, but it'll do. And or some kind of wooden structure that you may see here, or some kind of trellis, and or a bunch of other things. And so, and it's okay for a display garden. I'm not too proud of it, and I'm glad they got rid of it. When you are going to irrigate the garden, the best way to irrigate a garden is going to be by hand, because you're going to be able to see the health of the plant, and you're going to be able to see which plants are drying quicker than others. And so you're only delivering the water to the plants that need it. However, we know that life is complicated. We know that some people get really busy. And so there's going to be different styles of watering plants, or different ways that you can choose to water the plant. You can use a low water emitter. So you have just a simple pipe that is tied to an area, and you have a low emitter that is going to just provide some of the water. Or you may have some drip irrigation. So this pipe that will have holes perforated throughout, that will gradually release a very small amount of water, and that ensures that your area is your gardens are water. And Netafilm is just a name of a product. Some of this drip irrigation that you are able to bury it underground, and that's going to ensure that the water is delivered at the root zone, or at the root of the plant, so that you don't waste too much water. So here are the beds, and this is when they were installed with that irrigation system. So the water goes around and around, and it's delivered through some of those holes from the pipe. Uh, if you are going to be growing plants that are going to climb, it is very important that you provide a climbing apparatus. And plants do not care what the apparatus is made of. If you have a lot of money, you can get some fancy structure, maybe some made with bamboo, or some that are just going to be a stake with string. That's all that really is necessary. and you can choose what you're going to use. Here's just some bamboo and some string that will work quite well, creating a tunnel for plants to grow up and over. And the other very important thing that you need to be aware of is that in every garden, there's going to be an assortment of different weeds. So weeds will come. That's going to be a continuous cycle and task. And here is probably the best example that I have where they had a lawn and they simply put some other ornamentals and the lawn came back. They did not kill it completely. And the Bermuda grass is now taking over, making the garden look not attractive. So perfect example, please do not do this if you are going to remove your lawn or exchange your lawn for some water-wise garden or a vegetable garden. Here we have oxalis. That is a magnificent plant, but we have a succulent garden that has been allowed to overrun with oxalis. Now it's going to be a big problem because you have spines and prickles and a bunch of things that are going to make you bleed from the cacti and the succulents. And you also have the oxalis that is going to make the place look kind of weedy and unattractive. So it's important that you make sure that you don't allow the weeds to take the upper hand, or otherwise they can win. And they are going to compete with your plants for the same resources. They're going to be needing water, they're going to be needing vitamins, minerals, and they're also going to be competing with the light. So one of the best things that you can use to slow them down is the use of mulch. So the use of a organic matter material that is going to create a blanket on top of the soil is going to shade out the seeds from the weeds, preventing them from germinating. Not only that, but it's also going to buffer the soil. It's going to keep the water from evaporating, allowing the water from escaping into the atmosphere. It's also going to regulate the temperature, so it's going to cool down the soil so that it will continue to allow the plant roots to grow, as well as it decomposes, it's going to release vitamins and minerals into the soil so that the plant will have a supply of the nutrients for growth. So there are a lot of great benefits to all some of this mulch. It is highly recommended that you use the natural organic material made out of plant fibers. But in commercial agriculture, we do have plastics that are used for growing some of the vegetables, strawberries, and a bunch of other things. It is also, you can also use some of the wood chips. A lot of this material is free, or you can get it out of the bag. You will need to replace it because it is organic matter. It's going to decompose, it's going to rot, it's going to eventually degrade. And so it is highly recommended that you replace it every year, at least, if not maybe twice a year before you plant it, so that it looks attractive as well as it continues supplying. Rock, gravel, yes, you can use it, but if you're going to be growing vegetables, that's probably not your best material. But if it's just an ornamental area, then gravel or some kind of fancy rock may be an option for you. Or here's some of the rent material that you may find from a bag. They use a lot of bags in this yard. Apparently they liked it. And here is an example of a swimming pool. So no longer needed. They drill some holes, fill it up with media, and now it's serving as a nice landscape for them to grow plants. And you have a very nice layer of that organic matter, wood chips that are giving it a very nice finish look. So very professional and clean. So that's another advantage of having mulch or this organic matter on top. And here's a different landscape with some of those wood chips that are helping the plants out. There's maybe a product that you want to use. It's called a weed cloth. So this is going to be helpful if you're having problems with lots of weed. Here they cover the entire yard and then just made some holes for some of these plants, the calendrinas, to grow. Is it effective? The answer is yes. Does it end the care? The answer is no, because it is not uncommon for weeds to appear at the edge where there might be some small openings, or also where the plants were planted out of the hole. There's going to be some weeds that will come out of there, as well as with time, soil may accumulate in corners and weed seeds may land there and germinate and grow. So this will still have some maintenance that will be necessary for you to keep it weed free. If you have a limited space, then you can you opt for having what is known as espalier, which is growing plants in the shape of a wall or almost of a two-dimensional. So here's a house in Naples Island, and so the apple trees are growing as a fence. So not only is it creating a nice screen, it's also providing a nice plant with fruits. When we look at it from a different angle, you can see that it's very narrow, and it looks very nice and attractive. So it is a lot of work. It is constant work of pruning and training to develop these forms. But at the end, once you have the form done, then it's just small maintenance that will follow just to keep him small and keep him happy. But the end product of having a living wall for small spaces is going to be worth it. Here's where they have trained some of those ornamental pears. So they planted the tree, they let it grow to a certain height, select two branches, tie them to grow across, and once they have become woody, they're not going to move, and then allow it to keep on growing a certain height, wherever that may be. They repeated the cycle. And so you can see where they have gone left and right. They probably lost the big branch here and they started training a different one. So it's just a training, selecting branches, training, selecting branches, and you get that form. And there's a different view and what that's much older back there. And so if we look at some of the better examples, these are images from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden in New York, where they have done some really good work in their edible garden, including some of these apple trees that are being trained to have a very nice geometrical shape. So we have four apples here planted very close together, and there are selected branches that are growing in a specific direction, and they are crossing with the branches from the other tree. So they are generating this very nice intricate pattern. Here is what they refer to as the Candelabra Pattern. Once again, just plant it, select branches, and train them to grow in the form or shape that you want. Or here's just the simple V pattern, just two branches acting as a wall. Those look like small apples, and or you can also use them to grow some kind of vines, such as some of these grapes. And the garden also has a lot of things that are edible, including some oats, including some lettuces, and also a bunch of other things here that you can see, all of them having some kind of value for food. Some onions, some mustard, some oats in the front, and some kale, some pot marigold, some of the charts, and every single corner had a very, very beautiful plant growing. And here's some of the rows that had, and even the walkway looked very nice, softened by all these plants that you can eat. And even some of the hedges. Here in Southern California, we use boxwood to make hedges. Here in New York, they use blueberries. So that is a blueberry hedge. And then inside, they planted a lot of the lettuces. So all of them have some kind of food value. And here's a different one with a different types of lettuce. And so here's some of the garden beds that they have made. Very nice, very different colorful vegetables, kind of in the shape of a triangle, and looks very attractive as well as being able to eat. Notice how close things are. So it is very important that when you're going to grow things in container or in a garden bed, it's going to be a lot of things that are going to be annual. You're just going to grow them for several months and then you're going to harvest them to eat. They're not going to be here for years to come. So that's why you want to pack them as many as you can so that you can maximize the yields that you're going to be getting out of them. So here's a nice display of the cabbages and a different display here with lettuce and kale and uh, uh, another plant I forget. Here's some of the community gardens. That was parsley. Sorry, I forgot parsley. So community garden with some of the different plants that they were growing. A lot of those edible plants as well. And also you're gonna have bugs. Yes, bugs are gonna be part of the garden. It is important that you learn to tolerate them. So some food will be lost, but that is part of growing things organically that unfortunately some insects will eat them. But in the process, they will bring other benefits. So you will have some caterpillars that may eventually turn into butterflies, and that's very important. You need to tolerate the caterpillars to have the butterflies. That also is going to start bringing spiders. Spiders are good guys in the garden. They're going to eat some of the bad guys, maybe some of the good guys as well, but in the process, they are very good for having a healthy garden. You may get some bunnies. That's not very good because they're going to eat everything. So if you have the area that you're trying to grow vegetables has bunnies or wild bunnies, make sure that you put a fence around them to exclude them and just enjoy them, but keep them away because they could eat a lot of the vegetables in a very short amount of time. And most important is that you need to relax and enjoy the garden. I do not like how gardening and growing vegetables it's seen or portrayed as a war with the plants, a war with the bugs, a war with nature. At the end of the day, it is going to be a place where you should be able to relax, a place where you can grow some vegetables, a place where you can be with nature and have your uh, happy time there. So, with that, I will thank you and have a great day. Bye bye.